meeting to order, please. Attendance has been taken. Approval of the agenda. Councillor Wheat.
I'll have an addition under other business. Personal, like for hospice, sponsors.
Thank you. Any other? Councillor Gatward?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also have one item under other business.
Thank you. Anybody else? Motion to approve the agenda, please. Councillor House, second by Councillor McAlpine. All those in favor? Thank you. Declaration of pecuniary interest. Anyone have one? Should really state you have one now. Seeing none, we'll carry on to presentations. Michael, if you'd like to introduce the first delegation.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just this evening, we are going to continue with many of the orientation sessions that we've been presenting to Council since the inauguration. This evening, we have Sarah Reynolds from BFL Canada, and they are our insurer. They've been our insurer for a little over a year right now, and she's going to provide just a very high-level 10-minute presentation on the nature of insurance for a municipality, specific details or some high-level details on our insurance program, and things to aid councillors in how they deal with insurance and risk here at the municipality. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sarah. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much for having us. We appreciate having a face-to-face opportunity to discuss the insurance program. We are going to keep this at a high level and keep it moving along because I understand you have a lot of delegations today. So what we're going to talk about is a general overview of the county's current insurance program. Specific to the councillors, we want to talk about the conflict of interest coverage, municipal officials accident, and also a little blurb on claims management. I'm going to go through the presentation, and if we could hold questions to the end, that would be great. So the program overview, basically there are 5 sections to your insurance program. The one that most municipalities are the most concerned with is the liability program, and there are different types of liability insurance that you are covered for, including general liability, professional errors and omissions, environmental impairment, and aviation liability, and specifically that is with respect to a drone that is owned by the county. With respect to automobile insurance, there is both owned and non-owned automobile coverage. With respect to the property section of the program, this includes crime, property and equipment. Basically, your property and your boiler and machinery coverage dovetail together so that there are not covered. The personal insurance section applies to the municipal officials accident. And then finally, there is the cyber insurance section, which has 2 subsections within it. There's the liability insurance that covers for security breaches or privacy events. And then there's the first party coverage that includes your event management, network interruption, and cyber extortion. And that would include such items as ransom attacks. So speaking to the conflict of interest, this is a legal expense coverage. And so basically it's your legal expense for statute law insurance coverage. An aggregate simply means that's the maximum amount that can be paid for any number of claims during a policy period. There's no deductible applicable to this coverage. And it reimburses the costs of defending legal proceedings against any insured, even if the allegations of the action are groundless, false, or fraudulent. And keeping in mind that the insured includes the county and the municipal officials, staff, volunteers, etc. Legal proceedings refer to any actual or threatened judicial proceeding brought against the county concerning its legal rights, powers, privileges, immunities, duties, or liabilities. And it also refers to proceeding brought against an elected county official concerning the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act when a contravention is committed through inadvertence or by reason of a bona fide error in judgment. So it does not cover deliberate or malicious acts. The councillor's accident, which is very commonly taken up by Ontario municipalities, pays a benefit to the insured person, in this case the elected official, who suffers a bodily injury or death as a result of an accident. The coverage applies on a 24-hour basis. except for your weekly accident indemnity, which applies only while traveling on county business. Your weekly accident indemnity is basically a form of disability coverage. So if you were to suffer a permanent, total, or partial disability, then there is an indemnity that is paid. The coverage applies until the insured person reaches 70 years of age for weekly accident indemnity or 80 years of age for all other coverages. It's assumed that the vast majority of people are no longer working after the age of 70, and that's why, or earning income, I guess is a better way of putting it, and that's why the difference in the ages. The principal sum for loss of life or permanent total disability is $250,000, and there's a $500,000 benefit paid if the individual suffers paraplegia, quadriplegia, or hemiplegia. There are several benefits that are included in this coverage. A few examples are a repatriation expense, funeral expenses, education or daycare expenses for dependents, or rehabilitation or occupational training in the case of disability. And if in the case of death, benefit is paid to the estate of the insured person unless an alternate beneficiary has been previously declared to the county. So with respect to risk and claims management, so the role of council is you're trying to create a balance between a thriving, active community, yet you need to work collectively to mitigate and manage potential risk. Council members and staff must always show the highest possible concern for the safety of employees, volunteers, and the public, and to do his or her utmost to prevent losses to municipal assets. And this includes the observation of risk outside of your usual function or duties. So we tend to think of risk management as keeping your eyes open and using your common sense, which, you know, maybe it's not so common as it used to be, but we know everybody's got it in there somewhere. But for those of you in the room that are wondering, you know, so why does council sometimes say no? Well, it's because they have a lot of responsibilities, and it is up to them to make sure that they keep their constituents safe. With respect to claims management, never assume the county is negligent. Just because something has happened to, something unfortunate has happened to one of your constituents does not mean that the county is at fault. So, you know, for example, a sewer backup might have been caused by the resident's 6-year-old son flushing down the toilet all of his action figures. It's not necessarily because of a tree root or because of poor or aging infrastructure, but simply because something went wrong within their own household. A tree that falls on a car is not negligence if the tree was healthy. If you have a 1 in 100-year windstorm that rips through and takes a perfectly healthy tree down, there's no negligence there. The county should not be finding themselves responsible for something that was completely beyond their control. Potholes are definitely a nuisance, particularly this year with the weather that we've had. But the minimum maintenance standards, if they are being adhered to, should mean that potholes are not a reason for negligence. And so, you know, don't automatically assume that you should be held responsible for the damage that they may have caused. And a trip and fall, well, it could be because there was a lip in the sidewalk, or it could be because somebody wasn't paying attention. So, you know, just be aware that you're not, just because someone tripped and fell in your municipality does not necessarily mean that you are negligent. And sometimes the trip and fall wasn't even on your own sidewalk. People may think it was your sidewalk, but it could be a storefront, or it could be you know, somebody else's property. So as a councillor, if you are approached by a resident regarding damage to their property or their vehicle, or if you are aware of any circumstance that could potentially give rise to a claim, our recommendation, our request is that you report the matter to staff. You have an excellent insurance and risk management team here at the county who are highly experienced and understand the insurance program very clearly, and they will be able to provide advice to the resident in question. You can also advise the resident to contact their own insurance provider, because, especially in the case of damage to, or especially if it's ongoing damage, because their own insurance provider is required to respond to the claim first. And what they will do, because they are highly motivated to prevent the claim from becoming worse. So in the example of a sewer backup, They call their own insurance provider. They're going to come in and very quickly assign a contractor to get things pumped out, dried out. They don't want mold. They don't want issues. They want that claim to be kept to a minimum, and they are equipped to handle that. The county is not in the business of managing basement flooding. That's not what you do. So you're not going to be able to handle the claim as quickly as their own insurance company would be able to. And the county does have, as I say, an insurance and risk management department. It's accessible at insurance@brant.ca or at the phone number that's on the slide. If the county is in fact responsible for the injury or damage that's taken place, the residents insured will contact the county's insurance provider and will put them on notice. That is how the process works. Okay? Remember that the county's coverage for other people's damage will respond only if an action is in fact brought against it, and usually it is by the insurance provider. If you pay claims where you are not negligent, it does set a dangerous precedent. So we do not recommend that you take that approach, because it may encourage more claims in the future if that information is shared. Please remember that, like all insurance contracts, the insurance policy is subject to its own terms and conditions. There are exclusions. So if you inform someone that your insurance is going to cover it, you may be prejudicing your ability to actually make the claim. And remember that coverage applies to the county's operations only. It does not extend to operations of others. So if something has happened with respect to a resident's property or vehicle, and or a personal injury, and it's actually something that was the responsibility of a third-party contractor, it's actually that third-party contractor's insurance policy that should be responding to the action, not the county's. So please remember that each and every claim has the potential to become a lawsuit. So right from the get-go, it needs to be handled appropriately. Comments that are made in the initial days following an incident can be used against the county years later in a courtroom. We don't like hearing things like, don't worry, we have insurance. It does concern us, or wow, that's the third time this month that we've had a sewer backup on that street. So please be aware of the comments that you're making when you're speaking about the insurance program. We encourage you to be empathetic with people when something has gone wrong. Obviously, they're not very happy. People want to help. You want to help them out somehow. It's okay to say, I'm really sorry this has happened to you. It's okay to say, I'm going to do everything I can to help you. But we would prefer that you try not to admit fault or whether there's fault or not. Let that happen in the development of the claim. Do remember that joint and several liability, which has been in the news for municipalities lately, is still largely in effect, and I don't expect it to go anywhere soon, regardless of what Mr. Ford has to say. But that means is that if there are multiple defendants, but there's only one defendant that has insurance coverage, as long as they are found at least 1% liable, they can be held responsible for 100% of the loss. So it is important that everything is handled appropriately right from the get-go. So basically, if there are co-defendants and they lack adequate insurance coverage, the county may have to pay 100% of the claim. And that's it from my end. Are there any questions?
Questions to the presenter? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to the presenter. I think we've had you for a year now, I believe.
That's correct, since February 2018.
Do you see anything, or has anybody from BFL seen anything we should be changing, best practices we should be implementing, or anything to that effect?
Are you speaking from the insurance program standpoint or from a risk management standpoint, or both?
Well, actually both.
Okay, so from an insurance standpoint, the recommendations that we made at the time that we were brought in as the new insurance provider were actually taken up. Previously, your limit of liability insurance was $25 million, and you increased your limit to $50 million, which we were very pleased with. And actually, I believe that you also took up the volunteer accident coverage as well, which was also a recommendation. The one insurance recommendation that I would have, and your renewal is coming up shortly, so it's something to consider, is to consider a higher limit under your cyber insurance policy. You currently carry a $2 million limit. It's quite easy to get up to $5 million limit. And the reason why I say that is because from a first-party damage standpoint, so if you suffer a breach like a ransomware attack or something along those lines, typically for Ontario municipalities, and I can actually say this with confidence because there's been quite a few of them in the last 12 months that have been hit, and unfortunately several of them have been our clients. But the average cost of a ransomware attack ends up being anywhere from about $600,000 to $1 million. So your limit that you have now is adequate. However, as hackers become more sophisticated, they can create longer periods of time for you to be able to get back online. And of course, every day that you're offline means more expenses, and it means higher costs for forensics. So do be aware of that. The other issue is with respect to, although the vast majority of municipal hacking events have been more like along the ransomware type events, if you suffer a privacy breach that involves a large number of constituents or records or what have you, the likelihood of a class action is very high. And with a class action lawsuit, that means that you could be looking at potentially much higher limits required. So that would be our recommendation would be to look at that higher limit. Otherwise, I would say from a benchmarking standpoint, the county is right where it should be. Your deductibles are appropriate levels, your limits are appropriate. Don't really have any further comment there. On the risk management side, to be perfectly honest, we haven't had you long enough to be able to determine if there are any alarming trends. The good news is that in the last 14 months, we haven't seen any alarming trends. If we'd already seen some, then we'd be having a really serious discussion. Earlier today, I was actually with much of your management team discussing risk management, and there was lots of great questions and lots of great information coming forward. As I mentioned before, your insurance and risk management team is actually quite sophisticated, and they have a pretty good program in place. You're very lucky. And so I would say that you've had to manage it because you have sizable deductibles. But I would say that what we've seen so far is that it's being managed very well, and I don't have any immediate recommendations because I haven't seen anything that warrants it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Councillor Gatward?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the delegation, you mentioned the ransomware attacks, cyber attacks. Are you referring to where they asked for so many hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions?
Usually it's Bitcoin, but yes. Okay.
And that's actually paid, is it?
So that's a great question. So sometimes it is. I would actually say that most times it is, because the cost, typically, when municipalities, what we have seen from municipalities that have been hit by ransomware attacks is that the ransomware amount is actually relatively small. Because hackers are smart and they recognize that as long as they're not too greedy, it's cheaper to pay the ransom than it is to hold out for the big kahuna. And so typically the ransom itself actually is only about 1/5 to 1/6 of the overall cost of the claim. Most of it is forensics and extra expenses that have to be paid to to make access to a network other than your own because you can't actually access your own computer system. So that's where the expenses come from.
Thank you. And we did a cyber audit on our municipality.
Okay.
And have you reviewed that?
So I would not have reviewed it personally. It's something that perhaps has gone to your insurance company. The insurer that does insure your cyber coverage offers quite an extensive range of services that are included in your premium, and it's quite possible that audit was actually done through them or through one of their contractors. And if that's the case, they would have that information, and there would be recommendations that would be made to help mitigate your potential for loss and also to help you with premiums.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Bell?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the presenter. You mentioned minimum maintenance standards. Are they provincially set, or do you expect the county to have its own?
Great question. So the minimum maintenance standards are a provincial legislation. Our recommendation is that no individual municipality, lower tier or, well, in this case, a single tier municipality, you should not put a standard out that is of a higher standard than the minimum maintenance standards, because of course that means that you now have to follow that higher standard. The minimum maintenance standards have been redesigned recently, and they're actually have been quite well done. And essentially, you should not be held liable for something that happens on those roads. And where the previous minimum maintenance standards had a lot of gray areas, the new ones have actually made many more clear definitions as to, for example, the term sidewalk was never defined in the old minimum maintenance standards. Now it has been. And it talks about appurtenances that are encroaching on sidewalks and this kind of thing. So as long as you're following the MMS, your liability is dramatically reduced. So it's definitely worked well for municipalities.
Councillor Laferriere.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the presenter. Just wondering then, for the clearance, how does that work with their insurance? So when they pay a surcharge, the taxpayer, like air, they pay a surcharge, I think $45 a year, and the municipal government takes care of their sidewalks in the wintertime. How would that affect, if we were to adopt something like that, our insurance?
So just to be clear, so I understand what you're saying, so are you talking about a sidewalk bylaw kind of situation?
Yeah, where they have changed some of the maintenance standards, but it's based on a special tax levy.
Okay, so I'm actually not sure about the answer to that question. What I would say is that anytime the municipality is taking on additional responsibility, that increases your duty of care. So it just means that you need to make sure that you're doing what you need to do. Anytime that you have the ability to transfer risk, we encourage you to do so, whether it's because you're using a third-party contractor or what have you. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question because I'm not clear of the back room, how that works. So
I guess what I'm asking is that if we were to go above and beyond the minimum maintenance standard, and maybe not set a new minimum maintenance standard, but go above and beyond it, say for a downtown BIA or for areas we deem imminently needing walkability, that doesn't increase our liability if we were to do that.
No, absolutely not. But what we would suggest, though, is that that's not something that you put in, like you don't put in your council minutes, and we're going to do this for this area, because, well, what if you can't? Right? Because what if it is a catastrophic snow event where you're not able to meet those standards? So you can certainly aspire to do more, but it doesn't necessarily have to be something that you've made a requirement. It's just something that you internally have decided that you'd like to aim for. Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you very much.
Hopefully we won't need to meet you too often.
Well, I'm happy to come anytime you need me.
Well, thank you very much. We'll move on to the second delegation, which is the County of Brant Public Library Board Annual Report, and eventually an invitation to the general meeting. Who's going to speak to us?
Thank you, Your Worship and County Council. We are here to present to you some highlights of what our 2018 year looked like. Since we are funded 93% of our budget from the County of Brant, we're accountable to you to demonstrate that we spent that money responsibly and efficiently. So I'm happy to stand here and say that we had an excellent year, and we'd like to celebrate some of the successes with you. So you'll see in your presentation in the handout in front of you, we last year circulated 370,671 items, which is an increase. We're very pleased to be seeing increases year over year. There's still clearly a demand for print materials, and electronic materials are growing significantly. Last year we had 28,302 attendees to our programs. So we constantly try to meet demand for those programs, and in response to community requests for more educational seminars and more opportunities for adult and particularly senior engagement, we've been increasing the amount of adult programming that we offer to the community. There you go. There's some of the stats. Some of our achievements in 2018 include opening the Onondaga Mobile Library, which we're pleased to say is a stepping stone to providing effective service at that end of the county. We also installed self-check systems into 4 of our 5 branches. That's offering options to our patrons for service and ensures them a new level of privacy that they've never had at the library before. So in addition to growing our adult programs significantly, we are also increasing capacity for our children's programs whenever possible. Last year, we welcomed 1,418 new members to the library system, which brings our total cardholders up to almost 23,000, which is an excellent number for a community of our size. We're also very engaged in the education of our patrons and responding to their own interests, varied as they may be. In 2018, we offered 125 one-on-one tech coach sessions, which helps a wide range of age groups come to the library and feel comfortable with the technologies that they might be exploring in their own homes. We also offered 3,017 online classes to patrons, and these cover a huge range of issues. So we're pleased to say that we're responding as broadly as we can to the number of varied interests that we see among our community. So we're very pleased to say that we had an excellent year. We're grateful for County Council support. We look forward to an excellent year in 2019 as well. And we'd like to invite you to our annual general meeting, which will be held on Monday, May 27th at the Paris Branch Library. Are there any questions?
Any questions of the presenter? Councillor House.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Specific to last year, could you detail a little bit about the interlibrary loan activity from last year and the costs that were covered
Sure.
by that are jeopardized, well, gone now, if you don't mind? Thanks.
Sure. Through you, Mr. Mayor. We, like every library in the province, are pleased to offer something called an interlibrary loan service, where libraries in the province share openly. If a library system somewhere else has a book that we don't own, they will lend it to us. Similarly, we will happily lend any of our materials out to other libraries that have a demand for it. In 2018, we brought in 2,800 items that we didn't own and lent out over 3,000 items that we didn't own. So that was done quite efficiently through the Southern Ontario Library Service. They offer an interlibrary infrastructure that no one library in the province can afford to do on its own. If we were to purchase those 2,800 items that we brought into our system, in addition to our regular collections budgets for each year, it would have cost us an additional $70,000. And that's assuming that the materials would have been available to purchase in the first place. Often the titles that we bring in from other libraries are specialized, might be rare, or out of print, or of such a particular interest that it wouldn't make sense for us to own a copy of our own.
Councillor Ferrier?
If I may, just to add one more thing. I know this only because I looked it up. Kelly just gave you the very specific numbers for books in and out of our Brant County Library System. Across Southern Ontario, the Souls Interlibrary Loan Service, servicing all the surrounding communities, moved almost 440,000 books were shared across Southern Ontario in the Interlibrary Loan Service through Souls. So we just got the specific numbers for Brant, but the bigger picture of that service, it was a much bigger number.
Yeah, so as Councillor House had mentioned, the funding for the Interlibrary Loan Service has been cut in the latest provincial government budget. So we are in the process of investigating how we might possibly begin to close that gap.
Councillor Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the presenters. I'm just wondering, there's been a lot of pressure from folks in Brantford, whether it's on Brantford Council or their Chamber of Commerce, not ours, but theirs, and others about our Joint Services Committee with the canard, in my opinion, that we need a Joint Services Committee in order to have reciprocal borrowing. Can you please explain to this council and to those watching at home if the County of Brant Library would be open to reciprocal borrowing and if we need a special joint committee in order to do so?
The County of Brant is extremely open to a reciprocal borrowing agreement. It has been for quite a long time. The County of Brant considers itself a library without borders, so we welcome anyone to come to our library system, regardless of where you live, and use our materials. We believe in sharing that with the public. And I'm pleased to say that we've made significant progress in a reciprocal borrowing agreement with the City of Brantford and hope to announce something soon.
Wonderful. How many other library systems do we have a reciprocal borrowing agreement with?
I believe it's 9 other systems and something like 54 branches.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions? Well, thank you. I was at your One Book, One Brant event in St. George. It was an unbelievable event. It was sold out. It's like you've been here forever. You're doing a great job. We're hearing great things, so keep it up, and thank you for what you guys all do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Number C is Dr. Leo Voss and Lisa Young from the Children's Safety Village. Like a little puppet show. You see that?
Here, I'll leave that in your hands when we're ready. Good evening, Your Worship and councillors. Thank you for your time to meet with you tonight. Lisa and I are here tonight seeking support for the Children's Safety Village of Brant. It's a facility that is used to help teach children in grades K to 8 from Brant County, the City of Brantford, and Six Nations. And we teach hands-on injury preventing and life-saving safety skills. The grade 5, 7, and 8 program have a large focus on internet and social media safety, which we all know is becoming a much bigger issue these days, and it's just going to get bigger. We were recently denied any funding under the County of Brant application process, so we feel it's important that we communicate with the County Council the benefits of what we provide, and also we would really like to gauge the support for the Children's Safety Village going forward. Lisa has prepared a short video, just a couple minutes long, just showing some of the activities and the county involvement at the Safety Village. Thank you. I left this slide up. You haven't had a chance to see it, so I'd appreciate it, with your indulgence, I'll read it, because this is from Sarah McIntosh, who is the Student Achievement Consultant for the Catholic School Board, and she's a recent addition to our board. And this is actually, it was from one of our emails going back and forth looking at the experiential learning. Our Ontario curriculum incorporates experiential, hands-on or real-life learning experiences in almost every subject area. Also, it is important to consider the decision to continue to offer students further experiential learning experiences through the CSV, Children's Safety Village, was based in research, providing 21st century leaders opportunities to become better critical thinkers in the area of health and safety. Having activities such as those at the CSV that give real-life implications of health and safety practice is included in your handout. Now, our police and fire service providers consistently tell us that the Children's Safety Village of Brant is the best type of location and setup for effectively and efficiently teaching the safety programs that they offer. It provides a reliable, well-equipped teaching situation where they don't have to load up whatever teaching materials they can transport to various schools throughout the county. We get the same positive feedback from teachers and parents, and the kids think it's pretty cool too. Since we opened our doors in the fall of 2005, there have been over 80, and with the current increasing in growth that the county is experiencing, we anticipate that there will be an increased demand and a need for these services. Over 14 years, or after over 14 years, our communities are now aware of the value of hands-on training for our children at a facility like CSV Brandt. It has become a valuable community asset. With virtually no facility costs to our municipal governments, service providers, or school boards. We are now asking our community stakeholders, the above mentioned, to help with annual supportive funding of $10,000 each, going forward to provide a partial base of reliable funding. We believe that this will be vital to remain sustainable in the future, and that we need to establish this before proceeding with building a new safety village. And on that note, in your letter, it states that our new landlord has given us notice that our 20-year lease will not be renewed. That's why we're moving. So this will happen probably mid-22. So we do have time to work on it. We are currently completing the cost estimates for a new safety village, and that will require an investment of several $1 million. We will also be seeking significant support from our community stakeholders for the capital campaign. Like our goal for sustainable annual funding, we are looking for a combination of taxpayer and private funding to achieve the success. The physical, emotional, and healthcare costs of accidental injuries and deaths, as well as cyber threats to our youth, is something that I think everybody can agree are worth preventing as much as is possible. By teaching children safe habits at an early age, these skills last a lifetime as they grow into safety-aware adults as well. While we appreciate there are many demands for needs in our communities, we believe that using effective hands-on learning for children's health and safety is a worthwhile priority and investment. The Children's Safety Village of Brant provides a facility in which to accomplish that. Thank you.
Oh, it was finished.
Sorry. We had a very brief technical discussion.
Can I say a few words? Sure. So, of course, when I see that video, I could just feel the excitement building up in me, and I just had to just give a few words about what these children are learning. This is not safety education we had when we were younger. Today, we had at school Blessed Sacrament at the Safety Village, and you could hear the kindergartners. They're screaming help because Officer Ken from County OPP are teaching kindergartners what to do if a stranger tries to grab them. In the different age groups, all of the education is age appropriate. So while the concepts are very adult, how they're delivered are child friendly. the wiggly worm. You'd be a wiggly worm to get out of a kidnapper's arms. Like, it's pretty sad that this is the type of things our children need to learn, but it is making them safe. How to be safe on the streets, being a pedestrian, the internet safety, and we hear this from parents who volunteer all the time. They're absolutely shocked at how much information the children do learn, how to protect themselves from predators, online predators. As adults, we're learning how to protect ourselves from online predators. Children need to learn that as well. The fire safety these children are learning, they are going into a room after they've had their classroom that fills with smoke. And they have to stay calm and they have to escape. They're touching a door that's heated to reinforce that you do not go out, open that door if there's heat on the other side. For the older kids who are home alone for the first time, maybe babysitting, or they're old enough to be home in grade 6, they are taught what to do if a fire starts in the kitchen while they're home alone. What the children are taught is absolutely priceless. We have no doubt every single day we are there that lives are being saved and that injuries are being prevented. So I just had to say something about these programs. The children, they absorb it. And like I said, everything they're being taught is it's what we're facing in the adult world, but it's put into the age appropriateness from kindergarten all the way to grade 8. And you know what? You can get a bunch of kids to go in a smoke-filled room and not one will panic. Anyways, if you have any questions, we're here to answer questions.
Any questions to the presenter? Councillor Miller.
You guys have been on Elgin Street since 2005?
Yes, that's when we opened.
So if you're looking for a new site, ideally, how big would you like that new site to be?
Right now, we're on just under 2 acres. That would be ideal. We can go smaller. We would be looking to, there is some area there that we can do without because it just means a lot of grass cutting that we don't need to do. Depending on where we go, it'll depend on parking, what bylaw requirements are for parking, but roughly 2 acres, and we can work in and out of that. We could probably do smaller, but it'll take some adjustment. We have also redesigned the building to be about 40% bigger because of the demand, the size of classes, all that.
Okay, and it could be in the city or the county?
City or the county. We are currently exploring, that's our big thing right now. We've gone through the costing, a lot of the process to get a good ballpark. The whole thing is the location, and that's our big thing right now. And we're looking either place. What we also have to look at is the service area that we have. We have 6 nations, we have the city, and we have the county. We're trying to be like the middle of the donut so that nobody has to go all the way across. That's the challenge as well. So we're trying to do that, but there are some requirements we need in the area in terms of internet access and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, we're open. We're exploring our opportunities, and it's basically find out which one looks like it'll be good for everybody, and that's really what we're working on now.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Laferriere.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, has there been any discussion with our county OPP who are doing a new build in a very central to the community location?
Yes, there has.
Okay.
We have had some discussions, and as I said, we've actually met with Mr. Bradley looking for any potential areas in the county as well as the city.
Wonderful. I've attended, and I used to work at that Mohawk campus as well, and just wonderful. When I was at Woodview, the work you did for those kids was par excellence, so thank you.
Thank you. When we got the site from Mohawk, we thought it was a forever home, and well, that didn't work out so well. So,
Councillor Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the presenters, the request is for funds for the ongoing operations. My first question is, will this be an ongoing request for assistance as the years go on, in that it'll be operating costs as the years go on?
Yes, it is. Actually, that's one, right now, we are completely funded. We're a registered charity. We're one of the few in the province that really, we fund ourselves. It's all through donations, grants, donors, sponsors, and that scenario just keeps changing. So what we're looking at is, we've learned over the years that it really is a community asset. All the people we talk to, we've spoken to the boards of education, the police, the fire, pretty much in this whole area, all think it's a very good way to do it. So we're realizing that our community is really benefiting. So what we're looking for is some of those who benefit to include that as an ongoing support, because we don't want to go through a multi-million-dollar build and build something that's not sustainable. And relying on the charity of others, when you see how many charities are struggling, we aren't looking to do that. We don't think that would be responsible. If we can get at least some base funding, that would be a great help. There are some villages who are 40 to 60% funded by the municipalities. Some are 100% under their police and fire budget. So we're kind of an outlier there, and going forward, we're looking, would this really be the way to go? So yes, we are asking for an ongoing, and as well as the capital campaign, because that's going to be significant. So we're basically seeing, is there enough support? Everybody thinks this is a really great place. Is there enough support to make it happen? Based on what we hear, we believe it is, but now we have to put the pieces together.
And my second question is that we have not provided operational funds in the past, and I'm just wondering what has changed now that you're requesting operational funds. You just feel that, if I understood what you just said, you just feel that it is perhaps obligatory that the tax base help fund.
Can I answer that? So when I started at the Safety Village, just a few years ago, I did an audit, a development audit, to see how sustainable the operations of the Safety Village is. And it's not. Like many other charities, I've worked in other charities before this. I've worked in the hospice field for many years in Burlington, the bereavement field as well. So I've been slugging away at this for a long time. But when I started at the Safety Village, one of the things I wanted to do was check the financial health. And in terms of long-term sustainability, counting on just what anyone's willing to give us, because we only request a $2 donation fee for every child that comes. And when you're talking 8,000 to 9,000 kids a year, not every child can pay. It's a donation request. Some schools don't pay anything. When we hold our public events that all have safety components in it to get the parents excited about safety with their kids and to reinforce what they're taught, they are free. We just have a donation for whatever anyone can give. You cannot sustain yourselves that way. And we are fundraising, we are writing grants, we are doing absolutely everything we possibly can. But the future of the Safety Village, from my opinion, I'm the one who made the recommendation to the Board of Directors to approach the founding partners of the Children's Safety Village of Brant as a first step to see about building in that sustainability, because the communities really do get an awful lot from the Safety Village. It's a really different concept. And the sustainability was in question in my mind. So we have gone to all of our founding partners, and so far most have agreed. So that's why we're here. It's not obligatory that you owe us or this or that. It is to make sure that this type of top-notch safety education remains in this community. We are one of the smallest communities to actually have a safety village. Most of them are built in metropolitan areas. That is something we need to be proud of. We are mavericks because our community is so small, yet we service more children annually than London does. So we're vibrant, we're active, and we just want to make sure that this place is safe. So that's why we're asking.
Councillor Gatwick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to both of you for all the good work you do. at the Safety Village, keeping our children safe. And I'm wondering, you mentioned your partners. Does that include the actual boards of Grand Erie and the Haldeman Catholic School Board?
Yep, we've
Brant
talked to
Haldeman.
all of our partners, yes.
Both school boards have been approached, and they're both agreeable to help give you operational funding?
So far, the Grand Erie Board has. The separate school board, they're in the budgeting process. We're anticipating a positive response, put it that way. We've had discussions, but what we're finding is everybody we approach has got different processes and timelines. So right now, we have received positive response from the Police Services Board of Brantford. We have received, it was just passed at the city budget for the Brantford Fire Department, and the public school board has agreed, and we are still waiting on the separate school board and Six Nations, and they're all waiting for the budget process.
Thank you. And what type, do you have any numbers in mind, what you're requesting for 2020 for operational dollars from the county, or is that going to come in the future?
Well, our goal at this point was we actually, each of those community partners for $10,000 a year. That we're trying to spread it out amongst all those who benefit. We're looking at people with tens of millions of dollars in their budget, and we're hoping for $10,000 to keep it going. But we are spreading it out. We're asking everybody who benefits through their services, however their budgeting process works, and everybody's different.
Thank you. And my last question, that was great, the numbers of students. Do you get to cover all students then eventually in each school at some point so that no one is missed?
We've got, well, we have this year, but probably about 8,000 or more coming student visits this year. 8 to 9,000, and there are times available. It really is dependent on the schools. It's open, there's a schedule. All the schools have to do is book. They call, they book, they get a bus. Busing is an issue, as we all know, for everything. They book a bus, so if they want to come, they just have to call and book a time, and there is space available.
Okay, thank you for explaining that and all the good things you do.
Any other questions? I have a comment. I think it's great that you came. I think you were a victim of the rumor mill because everyone heard that you got the boot and you were looking for a new home, and then we heard you weren't going to reopen, you were going to reopen. No one really knew. I spent many hours on the phone with Bob Ritchie. So I'm glad you came, because I'm not sure why we didn't fund you when the request came through the budget process. But it might have been because we had heard, we didn't know what you were up to or what you were all about or where you were going to land. So I think it's great that you came to reassure us that you are going to land. I knew, in my previous life, you know that I've supported you financially, and I hope that we can do something for you. But again, councils are funny things. You're only one vote. You never know how it's going to go. But thank you for coming, and thank you for letting us know that you are going to continue to grow, and we're going to have a safety village for a lot of years ahead of us. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Tim Phillips, the Brant Historical Society. Scary but true.
Thank you, Your Worship. I often keep wondering why people add an extra S to my name. There's only one of me.
Oh,
Although I may look like two, but there really is only one.
oh dear.
Mayor Bailey, members of council, as stated, my name is Tim Philp. I'm the chair of the Brant Historical Society, and I'm coming before council to request funding in the neighborhood of $15,000. As many of you are aware, the Brant Historical Society has existed in the geographical county of Brant for many, many years. I think we were founded around 1901, and we've had some very distinguished people who have sat in my chair, such as some of the Cockshuts and others that are very famous people in our community. If those of you who have been watching the newspapers, you'll have seen that the Brant Historical Society and the Brant Museum and Archives have been in the news a great deal lately. Over the last few years, since I became chair, we've undertaken a program of improvement. The Brant Historical Society and the museum in particular was a fairly sleepy place, and I wouldn't suggest, well, actually, bearing in mind the cleanup that we had to do at the museum, it was quite a dusty place as well. Over the last 2 years, we've shut the museum down. We shut it down for 6 months so that we could do a complete look at our collection. As I'm sure many of you know, the Brant Historical Society is the caretaker of many of the county's historical records, including a lot of your very old property records, etc. We also have many, many collections that are related to the county. Now, I know that the County of Brant has a group of very fine historical societies, and I know that the county supports those, and I certainly congratulate you for your support of those local historical societies, such as in Paris and South Dumfries and Burford and others. And they all do a fine job. However, they are limited in that they're not looking at the entire county, and indeed the city. And the city and the county have marched through history together for many, many years, and we have very extensive collections of information about the shared history that we both have. So after shutting the museum down, we went through our entire collection. We pulled it out, we cleaned it, we documented it, we photographed it. We've made improvements to our computer technology so that we've heard a lot of talking about new technologies in computers. We've tried to safeguard our collection, our digital collection. We are in the process of a very large project, and I'd like to recognize Nathan Etherington, who is our curator here in the audience. Nathan has been in charge of a project to digitize all of our information, and we're going to be putting virtually all of the information that we have online for free for everybody and basically everybody in the world who wants a window into Brant and Brantford history. We've also gone through, in that same process, we went through a very large project to clean out the museum of things that never should have been there. And in the process, I think we opened 4 new galleries. In fact, we dedicated one of those galleries to the county. And we had an exhibit there of some of the townships and things which went on to make the eventual municipality of Brant. We've just finished a very large electrical upgrade, which includes putting not only electrical wiring, getting rid of the knob and tube wiring that our building still had, but also we've completely wired it for computers so that we can use modern display technologies and techniques, which young people in particular, and that's the target audience that we'd like to get. We have to get young people interested in our history. And by using this new technology, we hope to do that. We're about to start the process of putting a new roof on our building as well. Now, the key question that I think I have to answer, and it was a question that I was asked the last time I stood here, and that was, well, we have all of these fine historical societies that are here. Why should we support the Brant Historical Society? And I think I've given you some of the reasons. But I also want to point out that there have been a lot of links between the Brant Historical Society and these historical societies. And I asked Nathan to give me a listing of some of the contacts that we've had and the things that we've worked together. Over the last year, we've had many partnerships with local historical societies. And last year, we submitted a bid to host the museum conference here with the Brant Museum and Galleries Association. We've had strong support from the county museums, including Adelaide Hunter Hoodless Homestead and the Paris Museum and Archives. And Paris has contributed a member to our programming committee for this conference to ensure that we have a strong presence from the municipality of Brant. In addition, the Brant Public Library has sought to bring together local historical societies through a local history roadshow. And this series of lightning lectures will allow members of the community to learn more about our shared local history. And we've been a strong supporter of this program, and we're hosting the next local history at Myrtleville on May 2nd as part of Museum Month and the Brant Museum Crawl. And next month, we also plan to give digital copies of files to the library from the George Foster and Sons collection. And this collection has documents related to grocers in St. George, Burford, Kelvin, and Paris. The library will be able to publish these documents online through our Images Brant. And this is only part of our long-term goal to digitize the collection and make it accessible to the public. So as you can see, we have some extensive ties to the community here. And, you know, history is something which, you know, when you look at a lot of meetings of historical societies and other people that are interested in history, you see a lot of gray hairs around the table. And I suppose it's only natural that as you get older, you develop an appreciation for history. I'm only starting to come to terms with the fact that some of the things that I was familiar with when I was a young lad are now considered history. And I'm sure that some of you may have had similar experiences. I see the nods around the table. But it's very important that we also get our young people to get an appreciation for history. You know, Santayana has famously said that those who do not learn history are doomed to repeat it. And although I think the converse of that is that those who do learn history are sadly have to watch those who did not learn history repeat history. So in any case, I think that's pretty much all I had to say. I think that we've been doing what we can to try and safeguard the history not only of the city of Brantford, but also the municipality of Brant and the former county of Brant. And we've been working very well with your people and trying to preserve those. As well, we also keep a lot of your historical archives. And I'm hoping that that will translate into support for the society. So thank you, and I'd be happy to take questions.
Are there any Councillor House?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Philp.
Thank you.
Just to clarify, we did not deny a application for funding.
That's absolutely correct. Yes.
Can you just maybe
I was hoping nobody would bring that up.
Okay. Sorry, but you are here as a request for funding.
No, I understand
and
completely.
The money part of it didn't come up in the presentation. So
no, I understand completely. I started to detail all of the things that we had been through, and unfortunately, we've had some staff changes, and with all of the other things that are going, you know, I'm the one responsible. I have to take responsibility for this. The application slipped through the cracks, and I thought it had been here, and turns out it wasn't, and I take full responsibility for that.
and sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, it was if you had applied, it was going to be a request for $15,000.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Ferrier?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Presenter Philp. I'm just wondering, what has the county funded for you in the past?
The county had funded generally at a level of about $5,000. And last year, I believe we were funded to the tune of $10,000. One of the problems that we have in the Brant Historical Society is that while it's fairly easy to get grants to do some of the projects which I've already detailed to council, what's not easy to do is to get operational funding. And the Brant Historical Society has been underfunded for many, many years. And part of one of my focuses is to try and address the funding deficit. We have been in a deficit position for probably at least the last 5 years. And we've been living on some loans and other various resources. When we try to do various projects, every dollar that we raise ends up getting sucked into just our general operations. And we never seem to be able to get any place. We're constantly, it's like trying to walk up an escalator, frankly. and it's a very frustrating and tiring experience. And I'm hoping that this is not the last request that I'm going to be making of a municipality. Certainly our sister municipality, I'm going to be making some requests to them. I'm already working with some of the members of council to try and increase the funding of the Brant Historical Society on that side as well. And I'm hoping that this is a first step.
And last year, what did Brantford spend on the Brant Historical Society?
Last year was the last year of a multi-year contract, and it was $51,000. I'm getting signals at the back. $56,000 is what they supplied us with, and there were also some capital funds. I think we had. I'm trying to remember what we had in capital funds last year. We're currently working on $117,000 that council had granted us to do our roof and our electrical upgrade. And previous to that, we purchased new servers and a digitization project.
So you're asking for a small percentage of what that municipality has put in?
Yes.
And I'm also wondering then, would a longer term sort of multi-year deal like the one you're speaking of perhaps make more sense than coming every quarter or 5 to present to us?
Well, I'm happy to come here and speak to council every year if that's what's necessary, but I would certainly be very happy with a multi-year funding agreement, because it would certainly show my other funders that the municipality here was prepared to make a multi-year commitment to the society.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Gatward?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Phelps. I recall attending the 150th anniversary display that the museum put on for the county of Brant. And that was a few years back, and it was a very great and interesting display. I was surprised how much material there was, and I'm wondering if there's going to be any new county displays featured in, or invitations maybe for council to attend as a whole to view the museum, because I'm sure there could be some here that have never been there. So that's my question.
Well, I would be shocked if members of council had not been to the museum, but I would very happily extend an invitation to come out and see the museum. We've done a lot of work in the last few years, and we're very proud of what's there. And I think you'll find a very strong county element to the museum. And as I said, we do keep a great deal of your historical archives as well. We've got, I think, a whole wall of books that have old property records and other things in them from the county and all over the place. So I would very much encourage members of council to come down and see the museum. It's open Monday through Saturday in the afternoons. And if anybody can't make those times, if you want to give me a call, I'd be happy to arrange a special tour for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Miller?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Tim. Tim, thank you for coming tonight. As you heard tonight, we fund our libraries 93%. We fund our police 100% from the ratepayers. Firefighters 100%. Ambulances funded 50%. From black and white, it's legislated. Historical societies, it's at the discretion of councils, of municipalities. You obviously wouldn't be here tonight unless you felt that part of your funding should be on the ratepayers. And don't get me wrong, I have a soft spot for historical societies and cemeteries. But what I'm wondering is there anywhere else in North America, in any jurisdiction, whether it's British Columbia or Kansas, or where it's legislated, it's laid out, this is where you're getting your funding from, and you don't have to go cap in hand, or what, you know what I mean? Is it, or just again, completely up to the discretion?
You've actually wandered far beyond my area of expertise in in other jurisdictions. Certainly, funding of historical societies, like many things that municipalities do, they are discretionary, absolutely. The reason that I would suggest to you that that it would be important that the taxpayers support something like this is that it's their history. It belongs to them. And if an organization like the Brant Historical Society does not preserve this history, I mean, we have your citizens calling us and visiting us and asking for information about, can you give me the history of this address here, or who owned this property before, or I'm doing some research on some family who started a grocery store in Burford. These are your citizens. These are the people that pay for these services, and this is their history. And I can't think of a better reason. And of course, we're not. I'm not talking about something like the library budget I know a great deal about libraries. I mean, we talked about libraries earlier. I used to be on the board of the Southern Ontario Library Service. I was on the board of the Brantford Public Library for many years and vice chair of the Ontario Library Trustees Association. Those are big ticket items. Police are big ticket items. They're not discretionary. I think libraries might be. But police and fire and ambulance are not discretionary. But there are some things, if you believe in having a healthy community, if you believe in having a community that understands where it came from, what its roots are, and has that information available to everybody. And of course, I'm sure you're all proud of your community. And when we get all of this stuff online, the entire world is going to be able to see the history of Brant County and the municipality of Brant. I think that's something to be proud of, and I think it's worthy of support.
Okay, I appreciate those words, and I won't debate you, but I'm glad you're here tonight when the Community Safety Village is here, because, and we face this problem at budget time, there's so many people and organizations competing for so few dollars, so, and you've seen it tonight, so, but thank you very much for your response.
Thank you, Councillor.
Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Tim. A lot of our historical society in the counties here are on volunteer systems.
Yes.
How many full-time employees do you have in the city, or in the Brant store?
I have 2 full-time employees and 1 part-time employee. We also take advantage of a lot of government programs to bring students in. For instance, the Government of Ontario and the Government of Canada have student employment programs, so we usually over the summer employ extra students, but those are 100% funded. I can't afford them any other way.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Tim? Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you all.
On the agenda, you'll see that 4E has been withdrawn. He's going to come and speak to us another night. How do you wish to deal with the delegations? A resolution to receive A as information. Councillor Miller? Oh. Second by Councillor Pierce. Any other conversation? All those in favor? The library resolution to receive as information. Councillor Coleman, Councillor Wheat. Any conversation? All those in favor? Received as information. Number 3, the request for financial assistance. Is there a resolution to do something about this? Councillor Miller?
Mr. Mayor, I know they're asking for 2019, but we've passed the budget, so I'm going to refer it to the 2020 budget. And I'm also going to ask if staff has any recommendations for a possible location for the future Children's Safety Village, that they investigate that. I've got a thought as far as maybe by the Twin Pad or something like that, but anyways, if we do have a site available, I would certainly be willing to look at that, so that's the motion.
We have a seconder for the deferral, Mark. Any other discussion? Call the vote to defer to the 2020 budget. Thank you. D, the Historical Society. It's also a request for funding. Can I get a resolution? Anyone have any thoughts? Councillor Wheat?
I'll move to deny.
Can I get a seconder for Councillor Wheat to deny? Councillor Coleman. Any discussion before we, Councillor Chambers?
I'll propose an amendment that the words and the request be referred to the 2020 budget.
Seeking a seconder for Councillor Pierce? Any other conversation? Councillor Ferrier?
Yeah, I just want to note in the conversation that the request for $15,000 would be about 29% of what the city of Brantford gives them. I'm just looking at population, that seems about right. 13K would be about 25%. Also, I know it's not part of the resolution, but I hope that in the deferral process, we might look at maybe coming up with a strategy for all of our historical societies more broadly in terms of funding agreements, multi-year funding agreements, including the Brant Historical Society, but the other ones. I think that's somewhere we have to go so that we're not, much like we were talking about the grant situation, not having this hodgepodge of requests here and there and everywhere, but having a plan that historical societies can work with in consultation with the historical societies. But I will support the motion to, essentially the motion to defer that's been put on the table.
Councillor Wheat, are you okay with the, okay, everyone's clear? Councillor Miller?
I'm clear. I just, I'd like to basically piggyback on what Councilor Ferrier said. The historical societies, without a doubt, serve an important function in our society. And as Mr. Phillip pointed out, those who don't learn from history tend to repeat it, and we see that a lot. But at the same time, I don't like the, again, the hodgepodge way of the funding and how it comes about. So I wouldn't mind if we maybe looked at a formalized way of how we fund the historical societies, because like I say, I consider them to be a very important part of our community that we live in.
Any other? Councillor Gatward?
Could the clerk please read the amended motion for Mr. Mayor?
Yep. Madam Clerk?
That the request for funding from the Brant Historical Society be denied and be referred to the 2020 budget.
Everyone's clear? No more comments? Call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Jumping down to number 5 on the agenda, the adoption of the minutes from the previous meetings. Councillor Chambers?
It's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Pierce that the County of Brant Council minutes of March 26, April 8th be approved.
Any questions? Call the vote. All those in favor? Any business arising from those minutes? Seeing none. Number 7, consent items. Councillor Wheat.
Moved by myself and second by Councilor Coleman. 70 consent items to be received with information, and that is 1 through 10.
Any questions, concerns? Call, Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to discuss 7B2, please.
Go ahead.
I think that the County of Brant should respond to this letter. We have over 20 shared services and initiatives with the city, and we've done this previous exercise of a joint services committee on more than one occasion, and it keeps coming back. I don't believe there's much left except animal control, and if we can just get that reciprocal borrowing going, it doesn't need to be a joint service through the library system. And I would request or move that we respond to the city's letter, or the Chamber of Brantford Brant Chamber of Commerce letter, and explain why we have refused the city's request, and put it in writing. I'm sure our member, Councillor Miller, has explained to the chamber, but they continue to push us, and I'm tired of it, quite frankly.
Okay, Councillor Mills, do you have anything to say to Councillor Gatward?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. All I'll say is, if the council supports the motion, so be it. But I will say, we do have a liaison on this committee, and I did talk about this particular motion during one of my monthly reports to them, and I explained very clearly why we didn't support the Joint Services Committee. I just said we there's other municipalities we need to be exploring services with as well. So we didn't want to limit ourselves to just the city of Brantford. And the members are, I mean, they're free to ask questions. So I don't see the need to formally respond, but I mean, if that's the will of council, so be it.
Councillor Ferrier?
I do see a need to formally respond in a public manner, just because I think there's a lot of misinformation out there about why we said, not even no, but not right now and not in this way and not a dictated to joint committee, that we wanted to explore a larger joint services with other communities, the 6 municipalities that border us and First Nations Reserve. I think we have a responsibility to explain that to our citizens and also to the citizens of Brantford.
Any other comments? Okay, so we'll take that out of the mix and we'll vote all in favor of everything but that. Call the vote. All those in favor? Thank you. Councillor Gatward, do you want to make a motion for any kind of a letter? See how that flies?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, certainly. It'll be quite simple that the County of Brant respond via a letter to the Chamber of Commerce Brantford Brant with a list of the over 20 shared services and initiatives that we currently have with the City of Brantford, and this council's reasons for not wishing to resurrect the, for lack of a better word, resurrect the Joint Services Committee again.
Thank you. Seeking a, oh, Councillor Pierce?
I'll second it. I'd like to speak to it.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. I would agree with the letter going back, just reiterating our reasons for denying the first attempt at it, but I wouldn't, I don't think it's necessary to list all the services. Just, nope, we've already said no to this, thank you very much, here's our reasons, that's it.
So we have something on the floor, seconded by Councillor Pierce. Any other conversation before we call the vote? Councillor Gatward?
The CAO was nice enough to send me a list this afternoon of all the services, and even I was surprised when I read it as to how many and how much there is there, and the work we're sharing together. So I think it would be a great idea, because I'm sure the Chamber doesn't have any idea what's on that list.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor, seconded by Councillor Pierce. Any other conversation before we call the vote to send the letter? All those in favor of sending the letter? All those opposed to the letter? Are you counting, clerk?
Yep, I'm counting. Motion carried.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Gatward. Committee reports, Canesville Community Center. Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In essence, there is a 7th game of hockey tonight. I will move both the minutes at once, Mr. Mayor, that the Canesville Community Center Ad Hoc Committee minutes of March 25th, 2019 and April 10th, 2019 be received as information.
Any questions to either of the reports, committee reports? Seeking none, all those in favor to receive? Councillor Pierce, you're standing.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Howes, that the Community Service Committee report of April 1st, 2019 be received, noting there are 7 recommendations.
Thank you. Any questions or comments to the 7 recommendations or to the committee report? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Thank you. Councillor Bell, maybe you should get up now. Are there any questions to Councillor Bell or the committee? Seeing none, calling the vote to receive the committee from Councillor Bell. Thank you. Corporate Development Committee, Councillor Miller.
Moved by myself, second by Councillor Chambers, that the Corporate Development Committee report of April 8th, 2019 be approved, noting that there are 16 recommendations.
16. Any questions? Councillor Ferrier.
Yes, I'd like to defer one of those recommendations, the one regarding Holy Trinity Church, until there's some information that's come before council, and I'd like to defer that recommendation until it's been resolved.
Seconder on the deferral, Councillor Bell. Any other mark is pulled out of the package. All those in favor? Thank you. Now what are we doing, Councillor Wheat?
Well, you vote on it separately. You don't defer it, you vote on it separately, either approve it or deny it.
Well,
If it's denied, then there's a separate motion.
but what if we're looking for new information regarding it?
Who is?
Well, I am. That's the reason I'm deferring it, because there's some information that's come to light that might need some time to process. So I'd like to defer it for one cycle.
Well, what information would you like?
There's information in transit.
The information that's coming isn't here yet. It's a diocese thing from here on.
Well, why wasn't that information provided to the Corporate Development Committee?
Because it wasn't available.
I don't see any note in my package that there would be more information coming. Where do I read that? You know it. and
Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Maybe to help Councillor Weed, between the Corporate Development Committee and today, an incident occurred that was referred ultimately to the Bishop of Huron, who is conducting an investigation which is pertinent to our agreement to supporting the music festival at the Holy Trinity Church. We don't have it today, so it would be improper to approve it.
My question is, where is there notification of this in my package that there's going to be additional information coming to me? I don't see anywhere in my package that there's going to be additional information concerning item number 1, the corporate development report. Can someone tell me where it is in the package, because I don't see it?
Well, I'm not sure that it's in the package if you can't find it.
Right, it's not.
So would you?
So is this someone making something up?
No, there's an investigation internal to the church, and they've asked us to take a pause to defer.
Who is us?
Us as council to take a pause on this decision
Well-
until the investigation is completed, so that we can make an informed decision.
What-
We could deny it, but then we might be denying funding to a group that may deserve the funding and may want the funding. To me, it makes more sense to defer it until all the information is present. If you'd like to make a motion to deny it, that's fine. We could vote on that, but then they'd have to make the process again.
I'm prepared to vote on it, but to vote on it separately.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. I think we got a conversation going on here between two councillors.
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
not
not-
sure what that's all about here.
I'm really not sure what Councillor Wheat's trying to get at.
Then I'll back away.
Well, I think you should back away. If you can't see something in your package, you should assume that it's not there. If we're telling you that there's more information coming up and there's an ongoing investigation, that should be all you need to know right now.
Fine.
Councillor House.
Let's call the vote.
Councillor Chambers before the vote.
Just procedurally, I'm asking the clerk on this, if there's information that is not available to the public that you are basing your rationale for deferring on, does that contravene the Transparency Act? In other words, I don't know what anybody's talking about. And I've heard Councillor Ferrier say that there has been a request to defer it. I'm not aware of that request, and I'm wondering if there's information floating around out there somewhere that people are relying on that is not available to the public. And if it's an in-camera issue, then it should be presented in camera. If it's public information, then it should be presented in public.
I'm not sure what information is coming forward, but what I would say on that is a motion to defer for additional information can be made at this point, and when that information comes, we can make a decision then whether it's something that needs to be dealt with in camera or an open session for all members of council on the table at the time this comes back.
So we have a motion to defer Councillor Chambers.
Just by means of clarification, then, I'm hearing that there's information that's going to be provided in open session to the council that will impact a decision on this, and that's the request for, the reason for deferral.
That's right. And the reason we're deferring it and not denying it is because if the information that we're going to get shows no fault of the church, then they shouldn't be denied the funding. But if the information that's coming forward, which is coming forward, if it shows that the church shouldn't get the funding for whatever reason, then we can decide not to give them the funding then. So why penalize the church if they haven't done anything wrong? Councillor Chambers.
Then I just have one question. I know there's an event that was suggested. I forget exactly right offhand when that event is. Does the deferral affect the timing of the event?
No, it doesn't. Everything will be fine. And the information that we're waiting for will come quickly. It just isn't here for tonight. It could come tomorrow morning. But deferring this to the next meeting doesn't mess up any of their plans. It's just that why would we not give them funding if they deserve the funding? And if they don't deserve the funding, that's why we're deferring it. It's on the table by Councillor House to defer it. I need a seconder. Are you kidding me, Councillor Wheat?
No, it was seconded by...
Are you kidding me?
It was seconded by Bell.
Seconded by Councillor Wheat. Any other? I'm going to give it to Councillor Wheat just because it's absurd. Any other conversation? Any other conversation? Calling the vote. All those to defer. Oh, Councillor Miller.
Yeah, I got to go back to what Councillor Wheat said, because as he says, the information's not before us. Got that. So we don't have to look for it. But at the same time, I think I know what it's about, and from what I understand, from what I've read, from what I've heard, it has nothing to do with the church. So I won't support the deferral. It should, because I don't think it should affect this. Then I'll leave it at that. So
Okay.
I'm not supporting the deferral.
We have a motion on the floor. We have a seconder. We're going to call the vote. Any other conversation? Call the vote to defer it. Opposed? And carried. Thank you for the entertainment, Councillor Wheat. At the very least. I know. Oh my good grief. Public Works, Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Coleman, that the Public Works Committee report of April 9th be approved, and there are 6 items.
Any questions to Councillor Gatward, Public Works? Seeing none, I'll call the vote to accept the committee report. All those in favor? Opposed and carried. The Bucket Setter report, Councillor McAlpine.
Moved by myself, seconded by Steve Howes, that the Bucket Center Pearsall Town Hall Advisory Committee report 15, 2019, that the Bucket Center Pearsall Town Hall Advisory Committee report of April 15, 2019 be approved.
Any questions for Councillor McAlpine? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just, do we have a date for when we'll see that revised business case?
Mr. Bradley?
Through your worship, it was my intent, once, depending on how this recommendation was considered, that I would work with the mayor to find an appropriate time to do that. So I would say within the next month. So.
Any other questions to the Bucket Center Committee report? Seeing none, all those in favor of accepting? Okay, thank you. Opposed? Carried. Paramedic Services?
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor House, that the Paramedic Services Committee report of April 16th, 2019 be approved, noting that there are 2 recommendations.
Any questions? Councillor Gatward?
I noted the marathon meeting that you had, and is that the longest one in the history of Brant County?
No idea. I was chair. I have no idea.
I was so shocked to see the length of the meeting. And
Should have seen the meeting after.
the city has requested, I noted in the minutes, additional budget items such as previous 2018 expenditures, et cetera, et cetera. And I would request, Mr. Chairman, that any of that information that they are provided, that county council also be provided. Thank you.
So there was an error, actually, just to speak to this. There was an error. The committee adjourned, it says here at 9:30 PM. It did not. It adjourned at 3:30 PM. It still felt very long, but
Oh, you adjourned when?
at 3:30 PM. That's an error.
Oh, it wasn't 9 o'clock at night? Oh, I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
Councillor Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just taking this opportunity to ask the chair, because the province has spoken about maybe reducing the number of paramedic services from about 50 to about 10. Is anything come out, was anything discussed here? Or?
It literally, that news literally broke right after the meeting. So we should have a report for the next cycle.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, call the vote. All those in favor to accept the report? Thank you. Opposed? Carried. Staff reports?
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Wheat?
By myself and second by Councilor Coleman, with COU, thank you guys for all the investment in Canada infrastructure program.
Any questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Information reports. Communications. You have communications in front of you. There's no written resolution prepared. Resolution just to defer to staff for a report. Anywhere? Councilor Ferrier? Seconded? Seconder? Send it, yeah, Councilor Pierce? All those in favor? Oh, you have a question first, Mr. Miller?
Sorry, this is, we're voting to refer it to staff?
Yes.
Okay, and I support it, and because there's some implications there, obviously there's a H designation on anything going on out in Mount Pleasant because of the lack of water, and we were sort of relying on this water that Brantford would take over to backfill there. So I think, I think the staff report's good in understanding maybe what the implications are for the county.
So we'll wait for the report. Yeah, all those in favor? Thank you. Paris District High School request for funding for the nutrition program. It's in your package, what they're asking for. How do you want to deal with this? Councillor Gatward?
Well, Mr. Mayor, I believe we gave a donation to the Food for Thought program, but not all county programs that need this Food for Thought receive it, according to one of our staff members in community services. And thus the high school has made this request. And if we're going to fund this, I would suggest that we send the money directly to the high school and not to the Brant Food for Thought program in Brantford.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other comments?
The request was for how much, Mr. Mayor?
Well, there is no amount on this. It's just for support of the program. There is no amount on the ask.
If
Councillor Ferrier?
I'd like to move to receive this as information and connect with the, pardon? And to then, to send it to the next budget.
So you're
Giving Paris District High School some time to come in, formulate an ask, maybe even come and present in that time before next budget.
seeking a seconder, Councillor Pierce? Yeah? So you understand what we're doing, Councillor Gatward?
I thought it was $1,000, but I'm not sure. But no, I'm fine with referring it to the next budget session.
So everyone's clear, we're just deferring it until we find out what they're asking for. It's not on any of their documentation. All those in favor to receive it? Thank you. Resolutions, Councillor Gatward.
It's quite self-explanatory. Mr. Wardle was on the committee last term. He's still attending, but the appointments haven't been done at the county level. This is another joint committee that we have with the city, an initiative. I'm not sure if it's on the list that the CAO made up, but it should be. And it's self-explanatory. He comes to City Hall on the second Thursday of every month for these joint meetings. And he lives here in the town of Paris.
So the resolution is just to reappoint him?
Yes.
Any questions to the reappointment? Seeing none, call the vote to reappoint the man. Other business, Councillor Wheat. New business. Oh, it's the other resolution. Is that not? Yeah, you go first.
The Hike for Hospice is going to be on May 5th. And I'm going to be walking in it, and if anyone would like to sponsor me, I would appreciate your support. Anyone that contributes more than $20 will get a receipt that you can use on your income tax next year. Some of you know about it from last year. That's why I'm wearing this shirt that I've got. You're not supporting me, you're supporting the hospice. Come and see me when this meeting is over, because you have to fill out a form.
Thank you. Thank you. We're going to go back to the request for the new appointment, appointee of the Brant Waterways Foundation, Councillor Coleman. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had conflict in my schedule sometimes, so it might be better if somebody else takes this appointment.
Do we have any interest at the table to sit up the water?
Councilor Farragut had talked about it too, so.
Sorry, when is it?
It normally meets in the morning, early.
Which day? Does
Which
anybody-
day do they meet?
I don't need a damn thing.
Which day do they meet? Wednesday?
Wednesdays?
Wednesday mornings, Councillor.
Everyone, I have
No.
social services.
No. There's no set schedule sometimes, but it's Wednesday at 8 o'clock.
Just one random Wednesday every month? Okay.
Call of
That's
the
the
chair
problem.
random on Wednesday mornings.
Sure. I also, due to my semester schedule, I may have conflicts at times, but I also may not, depending on the semester,
So
so.
maybe we shouldn't appoint anyone tonight. We should wait and see what time frame they're looking for. Councillor Wheat?
Is there someone that would like to volunteer to sit on that committee? I've sat on it in the past. You really find out a lot about the water systems and the trail system here in the county of Brant. If anyone would like to volunteer, I highly recommend and will support whoever wants to volunteer to do it. But I know they normally met at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Councillor Chambers?
Communicating across the aisle here, I think Councillor
Councillor McAlpine?
I'd second that.
Well, I'll certainly support that, yes.
You'll accept? Yes. Anybody else interested in sitting on the, no? All those in favor of appointing Councillor McAlpine on a random Wednesday morning anytime? Good man.
When I was there, it always started at 8 o'clock.
Good. Okay. Thank you. Councillor Gatward, you have something new.
Oh, my question was, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I've asked this a couple times in the past about emergency training for counselors and yourself regarding emergencies. I wore my emergency management pin tonight to remind me that if there was an emergency in the county, would anyone know what to do? And
I would go for your pin.
the CAO last gave me a date of April sometime, and April's almost over. So I'm thinking maybe that got delayed, but through you to the CAO, when will we get that training now that we've got 6 months under our belts? Almost. 6
Through
months.
you, Your Worship, I think our challenge with getting that training locked down is the trainer's schedule. It's a trainer that comes out of the city of Cambridge and has been doing some training for us. So We will continue to try to get that training set up before the summer, and we will do our best to lock down a date on that in the next short while. But we are having some problems getting the trainer scheduled to do that, so.
At this point, we're going to go in camera. Councillor House?
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Pierce that we convene in camera to consider a matter from the Corporate Development Committee report of April 8th, 2019.
We'll take 10 minutes and come back at 8 o'clock. Oh, there's people. 2 minutes.
Okay. Bylaws, first reading, 1 through 8. Bylaw numbers, it's okay if I just say numbers 50-19 through to 57-19. Moved by myself, seconded by John Wheat.
Councillor Pierce?
I have to 57.
Yes, it's 58 now. That was just done before we added.
Oh, okay. So then to 58 then. Yeah, there's, 58 on here. Okay.
All those in favor? Second reading?
Okay. Bylaws, second reading, the same ones, 50-19 through to 58-19, I guess, as well.
Questions, Councillor?
Moved by myself, second by John.
Questions, Councillor Chambers?
Yes, Mr. Yes, Mr. I don't know whether it's on or not. There we go. Mr. Mayor, there's 16D on the agenda. This is the bylaw referring to the amending the fees for the kennel licensing.
Yes.
As I read the proposed wording for the that's in the current bylaw, there's a little bit of a unfairness in that. I have a different wording that's similar, but it more is inclined to present the intent, and the intent is that if a person would have been able to apply for a permanent zoning application, they would have paid such and such, but they had to pay a temporary fee of such and such, and now that they have to have a permanent fee, they should not be penalized and have to pay the full amount again, so they should have to pay the difference. So my wording that I would like to suggest as an amendment to the existing wording that's in the draft or the second reading is this, and it's very similar, but I think you'll see that it's a little bit captures the intent more. And that reading is, for kennel applications, if an existing kennel was approved through the adoption of a temporary use bylaw, the fee for a zone change application brought forward to make the kennel use permanent shall be the difference between the fee for the permanent application and the fee for the temporary use application at the time the temporary use application was made. And that basically, if that can be proposed as an amendment, it rectifies a situation where, under the current wording suggested, that if the fee amount changes, then it throws the system out of whack. So I think this is a clear representation of the intent. So I would move that as an amendment to the bylaw at second reading, seeking a seconder.
Councillor Coleman? Any questions to the amendment? All those in favor? Oh, Councillor Gatward.
I guess I'm wondering why this wasn't brought to the attention of this council when this original recommendation was made through corporate services.
Councillor Chambers?
Why wasn't the wording changed then?
The opportunity to do that is to amend the bylaw at second reading. That's why I didn't do it beforehand. This is the proper procedure to do that.
I don't know everything, Councillor Gatwer, but I think he's right this time. He has a seconder in Councillor Coleman. Any other discussion? All those in favor of the amendment? Opposed? Thank you. Third reading?
Okay,
That was for the amendment. Yeah.
okay. So, moved by myself, seconded by John Lee. Bylaws, third reading, number 15-19 through to 58-19, I believe it is.
Any questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Hey, next meeting is Tuesday, May the 28th. Now I'll get a motion to adjourn. Councillor Pierce, we stand adjourned.